This is Math 6, Lesson 4-8, Comparing and Ordering Fractions. A least common denominator, also known as the LCD, is the least common multiple of the denominators of two or more fractions, which basically means when you're finding a least common multiple, most of the time you're finding a least common multiple so that you can find the least common denominator of a pair of fractions. Comparing fractions. To compare fractions, you need to find the least common denominator of the fractions. Then rewrite the fractions as an equivalent fraction using that least common denominator, and then you'll compare the numerators. Let's take a look at a few. We have 5/6 and 7/8. So if I took 5/6, I can change 5/6 into an equivalent fraction, and I can change 7/8 into an equivalent fraction. I need to find a common denominator between 6 and 8, which means I need to find the least common multiple between 6 and 8, which happens to be 24. Okay? I know that 24 is the least common multiple between 6 and 8. 6 times 4 is 24, so 5 times 4 is 20. 8 times 3 is 24, so 7 times 3 is 21. Oops, I don't want 7 times 21, I want 7 times 3. Okay, so in this particular case, 5/6 is the same as saying 20 24ths, and 7/8 is the same as saying 21 24ths. So out of 20 24ths and 21 24ths, 21 is larger, so 7/8 is larger. This next problem, 3/6 and 4/11. I need to find a common denominator between 6 and 11. I know that 11 times 6 is 66, and I know 6 eventually times 11 is 66, so I believe that 66 is the common denominator for both of these. So if I have 3/6 and 4/11, six times 11 is 66, 3 times 11 is 33, 11 times 6 is 66, 4 times 6 is 24. So I have 3/6 is 33 66, 4/11 is 24 66, and 33 is larger than 24. Now when we look at problem number 3 here, wow, that got a little messed up. Problem number 3 says 2 and 5/9 and 2 and 3/5. So if I'm looking at those two problems, they're both mixed numbers. They both have 2 as a whole number. So really all I need to pay attention to is the fractional parts. I need to equate the fractional parts. So I need to look at the 5/9 and I need to look at the 3/5. Okay. If I look at 9, I know 9 times 5 is 45. I know that's probably the least common denominator, so I'm going to use 45 as the common denominator. 9 times 5 is 45, so 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 9 is 45, 9 times 3 is 27. So 5/9 is 25 45ths. And 3/5 is 27 45ths. And 27 is larger than 25, so therefore 2 and 3/5 is larger than 2 and 5/9. So this symbol would go this way. So that's comparing fractions that way. Let's look at an application. If a 4 and 3/16 feet piece of lumber is needed, okay, is a 4 1/4 foot piece long enough? I think they should say foot. If a 4 and 3/16 foot piece of lumber is needed, is a 4 1/4 foot piece long enough? Explain. Well, let's figure this out. We need to compare 4 and 3/16. We need to know which one is bigger out of 4 1/4 and 4 and 3/16. Well, 3/16 is the common denominator here. Here, 1/4 will go into 16ths, because if I multiply this by 4, it's 4/16. 4/16 is bigger than 3/16, so 4 1/4 is larger than 4 and 3/16. So a 4 1/4 foot piece of wood would be long enough. So yes, 4 1/4 is greater than 4 3/16. so it would be long enough. When you order fractions and mixed numbers, compare the two types of numbers separately. The fractions without a whole number part will be less than the mixed numbers, so it'll be easier to compare. So when you're ordering fractions and mixed numbers, find the least common denominator of the fractions. Compare the numerators and order their fractions back in their original form. This is really important. You can't put them back in their common denominator form. You have to order them back in their original form. And if you'll notice, every time I've been working with my fractions, I've been working with them vertically because it's easier to work with. For example, if I have 3/5, 7/10, and 4/7, okay, if I'm going to find a common denominator between 5, 10, and 7, okay, I know that the common denominator between 10 and 5 is 50, but it's not the same as 10 and 7. 10 and 7 is 70, but I do know 70 is divisible by 5, so my common denominator here is 70. 7 times 10 is 70, so 4 times 10 is 40. 10 times 7 is 70, so 7 times 7 is 49. And you might go, I don't know what 5 to 70, well then take 70 and divide it by 5 off to the side. 5 goes into 7 one time, 2 remaining. 5 goes into 24 times. Oh look, it's 14. So 5 times 14 is 70, so 3 times 14. Okay, and 3 times 14 happens to be 45. No, it's not. 3 times 14 is not 40. Times 4 is 12. 52. Okay, so that would be okay. So if we were looking at this, if we're going to compare these fractions, okay, all we need to do now is look at our numerators and see which numerator is the largest. That one, or which numerator is the smallest, because we're going from least to greatest. So we should definitely go for the smallest number first. So if we look at this, I still have that wrong. Hang on. 3 times 14. Maybe I should just do it over here so I don't mess it up. 14 times 3. 3 times 4 is 12. 42. There we go. 42. 70 is. That's better. I knew something was wrong. So if I look at this, my smallest number, okay, if I look at my things here, my smallest number is the 40. Okay, so this would be my smallest fraction. I would list this one first. This would be my second fraction, and this would be my third fraction. But we have to list them in their original form. That's why I write them this way. The original form here was 4/7. So if we're going to list these from least to greatest, the answer would be 4/7, followed by, here we have 3/5, and last but not least, we have 7/10. This next one, 1/2, 3/5, and 3/8. Again, we need to find a common denominator. So 1/2, 3/5, and 3/8. So common denominator between 2 and 5 is 10. That doesn't work with 8. Common denominator between 8 and 5 is 40. And that works with 2 because 2 will divide into 40. So my common denominator then is 40. 8 times 5 is 40. 3 times 5 is 15. 5 times 8 is 40. 3 times 8 is 24. 2 times 20 is 40. So 1 times 20 is 20. So we have 20, 24, and 15. The smallest number of all of those is this one. 15 is smaller than 20, which is our second number, and 24 is our third number. But remember, we have to write them back in their original forms. So the original form of 15/40 was 3/8. The original form of 20/40 was 1/2. And the original form of 24/40 is 3/5. So the order for these three would be 3/8, 1/2, 3/5. Now let's take a look at some with mixed numbers. Okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fractions. If I was trying to compare all 5 of those at the same time, that would be very difficult. I wouldn't like that. But I can actually make this a little bit simpler by looking at the fact that I only really need to compare my 3 mixed numbers and my 2 non-mixed numbers. Okay, so let's take a look at my 2 non-mixed numbers first. I have a 3/8 and I have a 1/3. These numbers right here, they're not mixed numbers. So out of 8 and 3, 24 is my common denominator. 3 times 8 is 24, 1 times 8 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24, 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so I know these numbers are smaller than my mixed numbers. So I know this has to be my first number, this has to be my second number. Now I need to compare my next 3 numbers. Okay, my next 3 numbers, I have 1 2/3. Actually, I'm going to put them off to the side over here so I don't have to keep scrolling down. I have 1 2/3. I have 2 5/6 and 2 4/5. Out of these 3, I know 1 2/3 is smaller than 2 5/6 and 2 4/8 because it only has a whole number of 1. So I know this is my third smallest number. So now all I need to do is compare my next 2 fractions, 5/6 and 4/5. So I need to find a common denominator between these 2. Okay, 6 and 5 is 30. 5 times 6, 6 times 4 is 24. 6 times 5 is 30, 5 times 5 is 25. So these are very close, but 25/30 is slightly larger than 24/30. So this is my 4th largest number, and this is my 5th largest number. Now, writing them back in their original form, it would go from smallest is 1/3, my second smallest is 3/8, my third smallest is 1 2/3, my 4th smallest is 2 4/5, and my largest number is 2 5/6. And that is ordering them from smallest to largest. Notice how we really only had to compare 2 pairs of fractions because we were just looking at the mixed numbers and making sure that we were comparing them equally at the same time. Okay, comparing fractions just requires you to make a common denominator and then make an equivalent fraction.